All right, let's dive into some Benjamin Franklin, shall we? This time you've thrown us a curveball with a full audiobook of The Way to Wealth, but get this, it's read entirely in Spanish.
It's a nice reminder that Franklin's wisdom is universal, right? It goes beyond just language and cultures.
Hmm.
And that's what we're going to look at today, his ideas for financial freedom, but also some interesting things about his views on the world.
I was really surprised when I saw that this audiobook isn't a straight reading of his work. It's set up as a speech given by this character, Father Abraham, and he's just quoting like crazy from Poor Richard's Almanac.
Oh, yeah. It's like Franklin knew that people, even back then, needed a bit of a story to keep them interested in, financial stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
Yeah, it's a story within a story, which makes the advice, a little easier to relate to and definitely more memorable. You think about it, you're way more likely to remember a wise saying if it comes from a character in a story.
Oh, absolutely. It's like getting advice from your favorite uncle at a family barbecue. You might not remember everything he says, but you remember the stories and how he told them.
Exactly. So what are some of the key takeaways? Or better yet, what does Father Abraham want us to remember? It really comes down to these two ideas, industry and frugality.
Industry.
Yeah.
That might sound a little, well, old-fashioned, but think about it in today's world. It's more than just working hard, right? It's like being proactive, making a name for yourself, and hustling in the gig economy. Franklin's famous early to bed and early to rise
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. It's all about making the most of your time, which is super important these days.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe not everyone's a morning person, but I think that the idea behind it still makes sense. In a world full of distractions, choosing how you spend your time and focusing on your goals, well, that's really important.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about frugality.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not be the most exciting thing in our world of, instant gratification, but Franklin was basically talking about mindful spending way before those budgeting apps existed. Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship.
Oh, haven't we all been there making those impulse buys? That quote is a good reminder to just stop and think, do I really need this? Or am I just kind of caught up in the moment? He was like the original minimalist.
Right. Like he was predicting the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early by centuries. It's all about making smart choices now so you can have a better future.
You know what's interesting, though? This audiobook doesn't just stick to money tips. It also goes into Franklin's observations about Native American culture from his own writings, which kind of caught me off guard.
It shows that Franklin was curious about a lot of things, not just business and money. Let's dig into that part of the audiobook next. Really curious about this.
It's cool how Franklin doesn't talk about Native American culture like he's better than them. He seems really interested in their customs and how their society works, especially how they govern themselves.
It's interesting, right? He talks about their council-based system where they make decisions through talking things out and trying to agree.
Yeah.
He compares that to the British Parliament,
Yeah.
which was often, a mess. You can almost see how impressed he is by their way of working together.
Right, like he's seeing his own society in a new light, questioning if their systems are really that great and recognizing that there's wisdom in doing things differently.
And it's not just about politics either. It even goes into their views on education, too.
Yeah, definitely.
He observes that they focus more on practical skills and knowledge that's necessary for survival rather than just book learning. He wasn't putting them down or anything, more like acknowledging that they have different values.
Makes sense. In a society where they had to hunt, farm, and navigate the natural world, those practical skills were, life or death, right?
Exactly. It's a good reminder that education isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It really should be about what the community needs and what works in their situation.
It does make you think, though, in today's world where it's all about tests and grades, maybe we've kind of lost sight of hands-on learning and those skills that you actually need in real life.
Yeah, I see your point.
Let's not forget about what he observed about their hospitality, which he compares to what he saw as, like, a coldness from some white settlers.
Oh yeah, the audiobook actually tells this really interesting story. It's where a Native American man asks about the purpose of settlers having church meetings. And he basically implies that it's more about money and control than any real spiritual connection.
That's a pretty powerful point, isn't it?
It is, and it seems like Franklin was aware of, well, I guess you could say the hypocrisy and the possibility of exploitation happening in the colonies.
Yeah.
It's pretty brave of him to bring this up, especially for that time.
Totally. It's a good reminder that even the most well-known historical figures, they weren't perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
But it also shows that Franklin was willing to tackle tough issues and show different points of view.
Absolutely. And you know, that honesty also shows up in a personal letter that's in the audiobook. It's one he wrote about his brother's death.
Yeah.
And it gives you a peek into how he thought about life and death.
Right.
You know, it might seem kind of random since we were just talking about financial advice, but it shows just how much he thought about things. He wasn't just some practical businessman. He was a philosopher dealing with the big questions, too.
And it's kind of crazy how he doesn't approach death with fear or sadness, It's more like acceptance, maybe even a little optimism. He described it as a natural change, almost as like being reborn into something better.
It's pretty hopeful coming from someone who is so focused on success in this world.
Right. And it seems like his practicality was balanced out by this deeper understanding of like the bigger picture of life.
Yeah.
He realized that while achievements are important, there's more to life than just stuff, right? It's so true. And now we get to one of the most interesting parts of the audiobook, the art of procuring pleasant dreams. Who knew Benjamin Franklin had sleep tips?
This is where we see his playful side come out.
I know. It's like he's saying, hey, life can be serious, but we can still enjoy ourselves, even in our dreams. And he gives some pretty specific advice on how to get better sleep.
I know. Fresh air, not eating too much before bed, the right pillow. It's like a sleep guide from way back when.
Exactly. And honestly, who wouldn't want to have nicer dreams, right? Yeah. It just shows that Franklin was thinking about well-being in a total sense, not just money. He understood that taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally, is super important for success in any part of life.
Well said.
We've gone through a lot, haven't we? We've explored Franklin's financial advice, what he thought about Native American culture, his ideas about death, and even his tips for sleeping better.
It's pretty amazing how much is packed into this one audiobook.
Yeah.
So what really stood out to you? You know, I'm really impressed by how he combines being practical with this deep understanding of how complicated life is. It makes me think that we can be ambitious and down to earth at the same time, successful and caring, driven, and still take care of ourselves.
I like that. It's like he's pushing us to think not just about what we want to do, but how we want to live our lives while we're doing it.
And that's a question we should all think about, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how even something like frugality, which sounds so simple, becomes so much more when you see it from Franklin's point of view. It's not just about saving money. It's like appreciating what you have and really understanding what things actually cost.
It's almost like he saw this whole backlash coming against, fast fashion and just throwing things away all the time.
Right.
He wanted us to think about what we're buying and not get caught up in trends that, fade away quickly.
I bet he'd be all about buying things that last, fixing clothes instead of tossing them and enjoying experiences rather than just buying more stuff. It's like a modern way to live, right? More sustainable and meaningful.
Totally. And it really emphasizes that whole idea of self-reliance and being independent. When you're careful about your spending, you don't have to rely on credit cards and loans as much, which gives you more freedom to make choices that, match what you believe in.
It's like being frugal actually gives you more power, right? Instead of feeling stuck because of money problems, you feel more in control of your life.
Yeah, I like that. And it fits really well with his idea of industry. It's not just about working hard to make money. It's also about using that money wisely to build a life that has purpose.
He's basically saying, don't just work to buy more stuff. Work to create, to build, to contribute something good to the world.
Right.
True wealth isn't just about money. It's about the impact you have on other people and what you leave behind.
Speaking of what you leave behind, it's kind of cool how this audiobook, which is about money, also has those observations about Native American culture. It shows us that Franklin was interested in learning about lots of things, not just business.
He was like a true Renaissance man, wasn't he? Always wanting to learn from different cultures and viewpoints, even if those viewpoints went against what his own society thought.
Remember that story about the Native American men who asked about why the settlers have church meetings? It kind of suggests that Franklin understood the issues and the potential for, unfair treatment when the colonists interacted with Native Americans.
Yeah. It reminds us that even the most famous people from history weren't perfect. They had their biases, too. But it also shows that Franklin was honest enough to consider difficult truths.
And that willingness to question things, to think critically, and to speak up against what's wrong, even if it's powerful people doing it, that's what makes Franklin still relevant today.
He wasn't afraid to go against what everyone else thought, even if it meant people wouldn't like him anymore. That's something we need more of today, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. We could all use a bit more of Franklin's courage to think for ourselves.
And we can't forget his sense of humor, either. Even when he was talking about serious stuff like death or problems in society, he could still be witty and playful in his writing.
Right. It's like a reminder that we don't always have to be so serious. A little humor can make tough topics easier to understand and, more interesting.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Benjamin Franklin, what's the one thing you'd want our listener to take away from all this?
I'd say be like Franklin, keep learning, and stay curious. Don't be scared to explore new ideas, to question what you think you know, and to find wisdom in places you wouldn't expect.
That's great advice. And remember, finding the way to wealth is about more than just money. It's about doing things that match your values, finding your own way to be happy, and leaving the world a better place. Who knows what amazing things you'll discover on your journey?